Welcome to the We Are Wake Tech podcast with your host, Wake Tech President, Dr. Scott Ralls.
Hi, I'm Scott Ralls, host of the We Are Wake Tech podcast, and thanks for joining us for what is today a very special episode of the We Are Wake Tech podcast, because we're filming and recording this on Founders Day at Wake Tech, our first Founders Day, celebrating a remarkable history of a remarkable institution. And joining me for this celebration and this conversation on the We Are Wake Tech podcast is a remarkable leader, the third president of Wake Tech, Dr. Steve Scott. And first I want to point out, if we can pick it up, we have our Wake Tech socks on, which I think was a Steve Scott thing, if I recall.
It was.
So many ways you'll see Wake Tech throughout this month, because while today, April 3rd, is Founders Day, it's kicking off what is at Wake Tech we're referring to as Spirit Month, where we're rallying the past, the present, and the future. And it will sprint us right into graduation on May 6th. So Dr. Scott, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Dr. Ralls. It's great to be back here on the South Campus. The socks actually were Matt Smith's idea, and on the announcement of my retirement, he made a deal that everybody that gave a contribution to the foundation that day got a pair of socks.
Oh, there you go.
And so that was a fundraising idea.
Well, I like taking credit for a lot of Matt's ideas too. That's what we do as presidents.
Absolutely, for our people. When they do good things, we'll take credit for it.
That's right. And when we look at Wake Tech and people talk about Wake Tech today and where Wake Tech is going in the future, one of the things I always try to say is, pay attention to Wake Tech's past. Pay attention to how we started. Pay attention to our history, because we stand on the shoulders of some pretty remarkable pioneering people who had this vision for what this started off as Holding Industrial Education Center. We've had 6 names, you've got them there, but it's today Wake Tech, and it's today the largest college in North Carolina. That
was becoming the largest community college, as well as the largest college in North Carolina, was one of my goals. That we were always second to Central Piedmont, and I think we surpassed them about 2011 or so, and that was kind of something that I had in mind as one of the goals. You were talking about the names, and luckily Francie got us a list. I remember for sure that we'd had 6 names at Wake Tech, and back in 13, when we had the 50th anniversary, we talked about the first one. We were one of the first industrial education centers, so it was actually Wake County Industrial Education Center. But we were under the public schools, and I've been able to find very little records from back then. Then in '63, when the community college system was created, we were called W.W. Holding Industrial Education Center. And then in '65, it changed to W.W. Holding Technical Institute. Now, I know you want to ask me, why does the names change? Well, as much as I could search, it depended on who you asked, as they would remember why the name changed. But W.W. Holding was not the Holding banking family. He was a cousin to them, but he was from Wake Forest, and he was a very powerful county commissioner back in the 50s and 60s. Then in '74, we got the first Wake Technical Institute. In '80, we changed it to Wake Technical College. Then in '87, we changed it, and I know why we changed it to Technical Community. That was because we added university transfer at that time. So there was it's kind of like Six Flags over Georgia. Yeah. We have 6 names over Wake Tech,
6 official names, but we've pretty much, for our community, they knew us either as Holding Tech when we started, or Wake Tech pretty much throughout all those changes.
Absolutely. So we evolved. I think that, I told you my story that people, there was a time when the word technical to some folks was a derogatory term. And my favorite comeback was, well, let's see. There's Georgia Tech, which is not a bad name. There's Virginia Tech, which is not a bad name. And I said, well, Wake Tech, that doesn't sound so bad to me. It does show our roots, I think. And the interesting thing is that technology or technical changes over time. It is not a fixed kind of a word as to what it's describing. So I think that gives now your college the power, the mandate to change with the times, move biopharma, move to simulation gaming, game development, the big changes in automotive and the EVs and wherever we're going, the self-driving cars, wherever we're going with that. Our job here is to provide the training that the workforce needs here in Wake County.
And that's been our heritage, and I think a lot of our strengths, we got a lot of things that make us strong at Wake Tech, but I think our history really makes us strong. Before I go too far, let me let folks know how we got to Founders Day, because we want to get that on history too, because one of the things I try to do is I have regular forums, faculty forums, staff forums, but student forums. And it was in a student forum, I think it was last year, when one of our student government leaders said, it would be great to celebrate all things Wake Tech. And had this idea, and we just started brainstorming during that forum and talked about, then we got to Founders Day, and what would be a good date? There are different points of history. I think it was in January of 1964 when Dallas Herring stood in front of Holding Hall, and we really became, here physically where we are on this campus, the Southern campus, our first campus. But it was April 3rd, 1958, when this charter made us from the State Board of Education, let's make sure we get this name right, the W.W. Holding Technical Institute. So we were chartered on April 3rd, 1958, which gave the folks of Wake County the authority, gave the authorization that we were going to be something. Wasn't sure what we were going to be, how we were going to be, where we were going to be, but we were authorized to be something. And boy, we've become something in that time period.
This college has it. I'm so very proud of the things we have done, things that you and your team are doing, and the things that this institution, this college is going to do in the future. The sky's the limit kind of things.
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, you got a program in drones. Speaking of sky's the limit,
but we're getting there. We're getting there.
We started something in continuing education in drones before I retired, and now I think that you've got a big expansion on the what is the correct name for the
unmanned aircraft systems?
No, for the campus.
Eastern. We're calling it the Eastern Campus.
Eastern Campus.
Eastern Campus.
And so I ran in to Anthony Kaysen at Ignite, and he was telling me about the drone program among the engineering things that you're going to be doing at that campus. So it's an exciting time, Scott.
It is. It's, but I always like to go back to that history. I want to go back to, and maybe you could help us, because you could tell us a little bit. This great book, Robert Ireland, and you kind of initiated this. It tells the history of Wake Tech, and I've enjoyed reading parts of it. I always go back to it and review it. But it also, looking at it in preparation for today, I think understanding our why is so important. It's not just the what programs, how we're going to, but it's understanding our why. And I look back at, Wake Tech, how other community colleges came about, and I think a lot about the history of North Carolina at that time. And one of the things I do recall is that at that time in North Carolina, we were a poor state. We were the second poorest state in the country. But also back in the late 1940s, the history points out that our state, we were 47th out of then there were 48 states in terms of students going to college of college age. And, after World War II, that's where there started to become this interest in the notion that community colleges needed to happen nationally. But here in North Carolina, there was even, I think, a greater focus economically because we were so poor at that time.
We were, and we had some textile manufacturing and agriculture, and the economy was based on those two things. And the foresight of Luther Hodges,
Yep.
and then governor later on, of the things that North Carolina could be,
Yeah.
if the opportunities were provided for our people.
And going back to Governor Hodges, because Governor Hodges was known at that time as the economic governor. He became John F. Kennedy's commerce secretary after his success here. And there were some things starting to pop in this region back, just reading the history, things you think about now, but what we call now the Village District was the first mall in North Carolina. Dorton Arena was a big deal in terms of an arena, but one of Governor Hodges' dreams came about right before we were chartered, which was Research Triangle Park, changing the notion of what the jobs could be in this region. And industrial education centers, what became Wake Tech, were the other plank in his vision. You had to have education, in this case university, to bring these new jobs, but you're going to have a new form of education, what he referred to as the industrial education centers, what became WW Holding as one of those, was part of that vision for transforming North Carolina.
The whole idea of the Research Triangle Park and what it has become world famous, what it led to bringing the jobs to North Carolina. There's a funny thing, Scott. In 2007, I went with the Raleigh Chamber Group to China. Mm-hmm. And we were working on an agreement with a Chinese college at that time for Wake Tech. Two funny stories about it. I'll tell you the second one later. But the first one was that we met these people from China, and they said, "Oh, you're from North Carolina. North Carolina is in RTP, isn't it?" Instead of
the other way around.
Right. And so that was a chuckle for our team. But the funny story on that was that I had prepared and gotten Kai Wong to do a speech for me because I went to this room, big room, in a square, 100 people at a table, 25 on four sides in there. And I was going to address them. And so Kai had practiced with me phonically. And I had visions, when
So
Kennedy,
you addressed them in Chinese.
I was going to address them in Chinese.
I would never have attempted that. But.
Quite ambitious. I had visions in my mind of Ich bin Berliner. It was like when Kennedy was in Berlin and everybody applauded. I had that vision in my mind. So I'd practiced, and Kai said, "Yes, that's close."
Close enough.
And so I got up there and I did my little spiel. 100 people, silence. Nobody understood a word of my Southern Chinese. And luckily our interpreter jumped in and said something to them, and they did the golf applause for me.
I'm sure it was endearing that you tried.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Learned a lesson.
Well, you talk about that, but that's something too about Wake Tech, and you see it in our future, but you see it in our past. We've been, totally connected to the economic growth and prosperity of this region. That's
right.
Part of what we were created, was to be part of that
tool for economic development.
Tool for economic development and workforce opportunity, and then opportunity for the people of our region.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking about Governor Hodges and his impact and thinking about that in the 1950s, which led to the industrial education centers. But I was reading, some of the names going back to that time. You mentioned WW Holding, who was I think a county commissioner champion in Wake County, because there
Yes.
was a little resistance at that time about having an industrial education center in Wake County, and he had that vision as a county commissioner. I think he passed away at a certain time. Is why that, you know, we were named in his honor. But another name that you'll see on the Poocher-LeMay building is Leo Poocher. And there was a story too about, with Governor Hodges, that he had led with some industrialists the creation of a training center in Wake County, and had Governor Hodges visit that training center. And in many ways that was instrumental in his seeing Wake, what would become Wake Tech in the future, for our inclusion in that process. So a lot of those names, you think about the catalyzing events that took place during that time frame that could have completely changed our trajectory if you didn't have those pioneering people.
Yeah, I never got to meet Leo, but Dr. Howell, Bruce, second president basically of Wake Tech, talked about him some, and that his vision and his role in seeing what could be done. And it was interesting too that W.W. Holden actually lived in Wake Forest.
All the way on the other side.
All the way to the other side of the county, 23, 25 miles or more from here. And that in those days, that, you know, that was a half-day trip almost.
Yeah. And there was some controversy a little bit about where we would first be located. We ended up here, the first campus where we are today on our southern campus, which at that time was the Yadkin Farm. Is that right?
I think so.
And it was a farm.
It was a farm here.
And,
yes, that's correct.
And you know, I was saying the other day, we had the 540, or the Regional Transit Authority was meeting here, and I said what vision they had to plan that right where the new 540 was going to run 65 years later.
Well, we had to move the Montague building. Actually, the Montague building was supposed to be farther north than it is, and at the design of it. Yeah. We didn't move the building itself, but the design had to be changed because it was actually supposed to be closer to where 540 is by about a couple hundred feet.
Yeah.
So I had to pull that building in closer to the campus.
Help me with the history a little bit. We'll talk about Bruce Howell in just a minute, because unfortunately he could not be with us today. He was feeling under the weather, and so he'll be our guest for next Founders Day.
Oh,
we'll
good.
plan that.
Good.
But we'll get to his role in just a minute. But you know, those early pioneers. I know we started classes. Some of our first classes were at Millbrook High School in drafting,
yes.
What is now Millbrook. Wake Med, we've always had it in a practical nursing, and then we became W.W. Holding, and then we became Wake Tech Community College, and the first president of Wake Tech was Colonel LeMay, who people talk about. And I never had a chance to meet Colonel LeMay, but I know you've had a chance to interact.
I got to meet him, and we had a picture made of he and Bruce and I.
We have it in
Bruce
the office
Howell.
now.
And got to talk to him and listen to some of his stories. The way he operated a college was much different than the way we operate a college today, with his military background. But instead of building additional facilities, the model was for us to move out to schools, anywhere that somebody would give us being Wake Tech space,
classroom,
we could run classes there. The downside of that, of course, was no technical equipment.
Right.
Nothing for any kind of manufacturing, very little for automotive or anything that we could try to do. It's a lecture class, sure. Right. We could go into where they were running a class during the day in a high school. So it became difficult. As a growth strategy, that won't work.
Yeah, and a technical strategy, that doesn't work.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. And, you know, one of the things, of course, is the partnership. One solution to that problem is the partnership that we have with the public schools. And the one on Wilmington Street, I'm coming, named for County Commission.
Vernon Malone.
Center, center there. That's a partnership with the public schools. That basically the public schools have the academic faculty, and we have the technical faculty there with automotive, auto body, cosmetology, and simulation and gaming. I'm sure there are other programs.
And collision repairs there.
So that was one, but that's a little difficult model to try to sustain. So your early college high schools now that we have on what, 5 campuses now, or 4? Four campuses. You mentioned Wake Med. Wake Med has always been one of our strong champions with the former president of Wake Med's name was champion there. And they have been very positive to the college. And back in the old days, hospitals used to have dormitories for nurses, and nurses training was much OJT for them. And Wake Med decided they wanted to get out of the nurse training business and put Wake Tech in there, and actually gave us the facility that was a former dormitory. I think that
it's still there. It's going to be torn down here in the near future.
If you can imagine, I used to tell people, if you can imagine, you picture in your mind the dormitory. Now knock out the walls for about 4 of them, a dormitory room, and that's the long, skinny classrooms that we used to have, or still do.
Still have that for just a little while.
Just for a little while. So that's it's interesting how we took what started out as office building, it went to storage, and then we took it and made it the public safety center. Then over in Cary, there was a shopping center that was on its last legs over there, and we went in and leased it because Wake Tech does not own that facility. So it's interesting at the time when we were growing at 10, 12% a year for a number of years, and finding the space to house that many. So I see that as part of our history, how we adapted to wherever the opportunities were. Is it last call here?
Yeah, lights went a little dark here, but we're still rolling though.
Yeah, okay. As we used to say, technology is great when it works.
We lost the light.
That's right.
Let me, so I want to talk a little bit about you coming in, following Bruce Howell.
Okay.
But, and your legacy, has been big part of that legacy in our future when we grow, was the growth president. It was a unique time, but Dr. Howell also helped lay some of that groundwork, because the North Campus, which now is roughly equivalent to the Southern Campus, the Scott Northern Campus. Let me make sure I reference it the right way. You don't ever say just the Northern Campus, the Scott Northern Campus. But the Scott Northern Campus today is equivalent in size and growing probably faster beyond what is our original Southern Campus. But, that was, Bruce kind of started the acquisition of the land out there, which led to that. Can you talk about that? And, I think you've mentioned that those opportunities were a real attraction for you coming here.
Sure. When I came here, I had been in South Carolina for 16 years, not as a president, but at 2 colleges. Then I went to Southeastern as a president, small rural community college. So it was really a big thing at Southeastern when we got to build a new building for that area. Then I went to the system office when you were there
we worked together. You were my boss there for a little while.
And then I went to Kinston at Lenore Community College. So I came here in 03. And one of the big things about coming here, my goal was to build the North Campus. That's what I was excited. I'd never built a campus before. Little did I know I'd get to build 4 or 5 more campuses during that period of time. But Bruce, in the 90s, I think it was 94, acquired that land. It was a farm, and he worked very closely with the family and acquired it then for the price of about $10,000 an acre, when it was probably worth $50,000 an acre then or more. But he worked with the family there, and that was setting here, I guess land sets, doesn't it? When I came in '03, and I was all excited about building the North Campus. We still had to get another bond passed in '04.
So right out of the gate, that was right out of the gate for you.
Yes, had to get that one. That was the first one, and we used it to build the first 3 buildings there at the North Campus. So it was. It's amazing to see what's happened up there, Scott.
At the North, it's a remarkable. I have to tell you a story. It's, Saturday, kicking off our Spirit Month this month, but we had an open house, which has become a big deal here at Wake Tech. We really, every year, and everybody turns out. I'm so proud of our faculty and staff and our student ambassadors who show up, and Wake Tech is just on display. And this time it's Northern Campus and the Healthcare and Perry Health Science Campus. And it was a little cloudy out that day, and it worked out great. But I was walking across the campus, going to some of the different places, and I watched a mother and her son cross one of the bridges. And she said, "Wow, this is really a great campus." And that's the things that when you hear someone, hear the students say, it exceeds, that campus, our other facilities exceed expectations.
That was one of the goals that I preached when I first became president here. And there's a funny story about that, is that the culinary program, specifically the baking part, did candy boxes. And they had these little boxes about yay big, and I got the first one. And on the lid, it had the names and shapes of, you open the box up, a little personal box of candy, and it had the names of candy you were going to eat. If it was just chocolate, caramel, coconut, whatever was in it. And there were 4 names, and I looked in the box, and there's 5 pieces of candy. And I said to the students there, I says, "Oh look, somebody put an extra piece of candy in my box." And the student said, "Oh no, Dr. Scott, you told us you wanted us to exceed expectations, and that's why we had 5 pieces of candy instead of 4. So I thought that was good.
Students have some pretty good ideas. Candy, Founders Day, if you listen to them, you can
learn a lot.
Absolutely. Before we get off expansion, because you then started that growth, and there was a time period there, that 2008, 2012 period, where Wake Tech was not only the fastest growing, it was the fastest, or one of the fastest growing in the United States. We have the awards that show that in our office, but that growth became hyper as the county just went like this. Well, the county goes like this, and Wake Tech started moving out, and strategically too. Was Research Triangle Park the next place after North in your strategic thinking?
It had always been in the back of my mind, but couldn't get land there, and so finding land there. So we went with after North Campus, we went with public safety, because we could buy that property.
Right. And that was a renovation property.
Exactly. And we bought the property across the street where the Dunkin' Donuts place is.
Which is going to be affordable housing now as we move out.
That's a great idea. And then we rented the space in Cary, where the Western Wake campus. So those came in. RTP was actually one of the last things that I did before retired.
But it's quite a strategic effort to piece that property together to make that possible.
Oh, it is. And some of the rules there is, as you know, that it's either 25 or 33% of his space has to be green space. So you can't go in and pave parking spaces for your students. It makes it difficult to add campuses. And Wake Tech is subject to the same rules that every builder in Wake County is subject to when you build.
Well, I often think of your foresight with that when I think about where we're going with a lot of these technology programs that you talked about, our movement in biotech and the connections. So, again, our trajectory forward is based a lot on the visions of the past. So,
and we looked at, one of the things is we looked at the map of Wake County and said, where is the population centers, or where are the population centers? And then where are the major traffic arteries? And one of the goals was to be aligning the campuses on those major traffic arteries. But an interesting thing happened and was online education. As we grew, and we saw it as a way to be able to serve more people with the growth. And what I'm very proud that we did, and that faculty did and pushed for, was that there are three parts to an online class. There's the student, there is the learning objects, the materials that you're teaching, and the third one is the skills of the faculty. So you got to have all three of those. So one of the first things we did was that we needed to make sure that the student knew how to do things like attach a file. So developed a test for the student, free test for the student who wanted to take an online class. And if they didn't pass the test, we had a free tutorial that they could take. The second piece was the instruction. We brought people in to design learning objects, to design the content of the courses. And then the other part was the faculty, that the faculty had to learn how to teach online classes. And we paid extra for teaching online classes, first ones that they taught. And so suddenly we had figured out that we had all three parts covered: the student part, the content part, and the faculty delivery part. And then lo and behold, a couple years later, COVID hit.
I was going to say, there's no one who was more thankful for the vision that existed here at Wake Tech going back about 10 years in online education than I was during those very challenging 2 years of COVID. I don't know that there was a college that could have been more prepared, not knowing, none of us would have ever guessed what that was, or if you lived it, you didn't really realize what it was about in terms of turning a ship like this into completely online. But you couldn't be fully prepared, but we were as prepared as you could possibly be, not having known what we were facing when folks here had those visions.
I would love to say that I saw COVID coming, but I didn't. But what we did see was the need for those three parts.
Yeah.
And the other piece was simulators. That one of my, the first ones, in healthcare, the simulations, which were the computerized mannequins at the time, that we were early, Wake Tech was early in to using those, and I think now you're on your second, third iterations of those. One of my favorite, though, is in the heavy equipment, that we knew that you couldn't find 100 acres in Wake County where students could get out there with bulldozers and graders and things, so we got simulators. And I've driven some of those simulators, and you're on there.
I know, I did. I think I did my first day here. They took
you
me
get 180 degrees or more, and you actually feel like you're doing one, and then you intern them to companies that want to get those students. So it works out well.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I think you can probably express this as well as anybody. You know, when we talk about Wake Tech and we talk about history or we celebrate aspects, sometimes it's about, you know, it just gravitates to places or can be stuff like simulators.
Right.
But, and your wording, the secret sauce is something very different. The people here, if you look at these remarkable facilities that people brag about, the people who work here are over and above how remarkable some of our resources and facilities are. And I was thinking about that during open house, that just this past Saturday, and watching, you know, just this team of Wake Tech folks who turn out, and, you know, and I would say to them, thank you for being here on a Saturday. And people kind of, you know, no, I want to be here this Saturday. This is what I'm about. People are here because, not because, you know, it is a place that they work, but there's a missional focus to the people of Wake Tech. And you used to describe it as the secret sauce. And I was wondering if maybe you could articulate that, because it's something that we don't have ribbon cuttings around secret sauce, but it is it's the blood that what keeps us flowing here at Wake Tech.
You know, as a college president, we get way too much credit for what our people do. And one of the things that I always tried to do was to recognize the boots on the ground, the faculty and staff that are actually meeting. You know, as president, we don't see any students to amount to anything. It's not like the faculty member that's teaching 180
every day.
Students. It's just not that. And so at board meetings and other meetings, I would get all of this praise about Wake Tech, what we're doing, and I'd say, no, we have a secret sauce. And the secret sauce are our employees. Well, one of the trustees decided that they would go, I believe it was to the pit, and had them bottle some of their barbecue sauce and actually put my picture on a bottle of barbecue sauce, and deemed that to be the secret sauce is our people. And I'm sure that we'll have more employees listening to this than we will have students. But I will just reiterate that Dr. Ralls and I can do very, very little without your contribution and what you have done for this college. It just makes all the difference in the world, and you do it every day. That you get up in the morning, or you teach late at night, or whatever you're doing to make this college a better place. And Dr. Ralls and I say thank you to each and every one of you.
Yep, they're remarkably special people who choose to give their focus and their career to Wake Tech, and they truly have made this place what it is, and our history and our past. I thought about that reading through this great history that, as you mentioned, doesn't take us all the way to where we are today, but takes us up through about the start of the North Campus. But you can read the names throughout here, the people who, we mentioned a few in the very early days, and I'm not going to mention anybody else's name because I'll leave some out. But, you hear about presidents, but our role is only because of the impact that the people here and the vision they've had, the work that they put in, but the heart is really what strikes me about the people of Wake Tech. It
is, and when I teach leadership classes to presidential wannabes, I tell them that the number one thing that you can do is cultivate employees. I always saw my role and the role of president is to get resources for our people and then get the hell out of their way and let them do what they deem best. And then the other part is to support them. There have been a couple of times in my career when I supported employees, and then afterwards I went back to them and told them, now, you were wrong. But I told you I was going to support you in this, and I did. So it's, there's so many times, however, when they're right. They're kind of like the Irish snow, 99 and 44 100%.
Yeah, no, that's right. I often feel like, when you've got a lot of momentum, you can handle a speed bump.
Yes.
So mistakes aren't nearly as noticeable when you're got a lot of momentum going. But.
Absolutely. And I think that the community, because of our faculty and staff and the momentum, the bond referenda, we've passed with 70%.
Yeah, I was worried about it last time, and we passed with 70 again.
That's unheard of, folks, that 70% of the voters on a vote for what was the last one, 300 and what million?
354 million.
354 million. That's real money, folks. That 70+% of the voters voted yes. That's not because of Scott and I, that's because of you. Because you're the ones, our faculty and staff, are the ones who are out there every day with the students and with the employers and with the community.
Yeah, we have unique community support in this county. You can tell it through the bonds, you can tell it through Ignite with 750 business leaders, and that sells out in 48 hours. You can just see it in multiple ways. And so our history has led us to a unique place and sets us up for our future as well. You and I could stay here and talk about Wake Tech for the rest of the afternoon, but we might lose a few people that way, so we may need to wrap it up. But one way I'd like to wrap it up is ask you, I remember when you were coming to Wake Tech, or when you had that vision in your eye of Wake Tech, and you saw something here that was special at Wake Tech. And think about this, what is something that uniquely is, what's something that's so unique about Wake Tech? I'll tell you one thing I say, just to give you some time to think about that to wrap us up. But one of the things that I say to folks, they don't quite understand it when I say it, so I have to explain it, is that Wake Tech is America's most comprehensive opportunity college. And what I mean by that is when you take how we operate within North Carolina community colleges, all of the things that we do, whether it's on this campus, Southern Campus, where we have one of the 3 best ag tech programs in North America, to what we do at the Beltline Center and our literacy work and all the different types of programs that we have. When you put all the things that we do that people couldn't imagine, that there are more doors to opportunity, I think, at a place at Wake Tech than any other college in the United States. And I think that's something that is to be cherished about us, is to, I like to say we take the top 100%, and there's multiple doors of opportunity that people come through at Wake Tech. And that's something you can't see sometimes unless you're in the roles like you and I have, because we are so big and so comprehensive. But when you see it from that perspective, it is a remarkably beautiful and unique place. So tell us something different that you would say is particularly unique about Wake Tech.
I think it's our people. It's a special brand of individual who comes to work at Wake Tech and stays at Wake Tech. Our people, that special sauce.
The secret sauce.
Secret sauce is the part that I think makes us different, because this community, there are lots of opportunities. I was president of small rural college, as you were, and there are limited opportunities for the people who are living in that small county. Whereas here, I know that there are lots of opportunities that our people could do rather than teach, be a staff member here at Wake Tech. And they choose to do it. And I think it's because that we have done good, for so much good, for so many people, for so long, that folks I used to explain to people that what is a community college? We're something like a social worker, where instead of giving people a handout, what we do is help them learn to help themselves. And that's what you're saying about an opportunity, that the opportunities are there, but the students have to reach out and grab that themselves. So, you know, Scott, I was in community colleges for 46 years, and 16 years in South Carolina and 30 years here in North Carolina. And I think that Wake Tech, for me, was the opportunity that I got to do the most good for the most people, to help them help themselves.
Yeah. Well, one thing I feel very blessed is that having the opportunity to work at Wake Tech with all our other colleagues, I never wake up in the morning wondering, do I have a purpose in life?
No.
And that's a nice intangible.
It is. And we thank our faculty and staff for what you are doing and continue to do. You and I are going to meet with some retirees later today, and looking forward to doing that. But it's a great place to be, and I thank you for this opportunity. And
I will wrap up by thanking you. You know, you were one of the people whose shoulders I get to stand on these days. And just like Bruce Howell, who was not able to be with us today, but we'll bring him in and we'll have this further conversation, because again, when people listen to this podcast, it's often about what we're doing or what we're getting ready to do. But everything about Wake Tech is built on the vision and the people who came before us. And that's a remarkable foundation for an institution like ours. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And thank you for joining us on this special Founders Day episode of the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and please join us next month for the newest episode of We Are Wake Tech. I'm Scott Ralls, the host of We Are Wake Tech, and very proud to be the president of Wake Tech Community College.
I'm Lori Clowers, and April is Spirit Month at Wake Tech, rallying the past, present, and future. It all kicked off on Saturday, April 1st at Open House and continued the following day at the Wake Tech Eagles baseball game. Then on Monday, April 3rd, Wake Tech celebrated its inaugural Founders Day, the day the college was chartered in 1958. The rest of the month of April has been full of fun and surprises, including tie-dye t-shirts and funnel cakes. More than 1,100 guests came out to Open House at the Perry Health Sciences and Scott Northern Wake campuses. Faculty and staff presented information about academic programs and student resources, while student ambassadors offered campus tours. And everyone who came was told about Free Book Fall. If you haven't heard, it's an exciting new initiative that provides all the printed and digital textbooks for students in degree programs this fall, free of charge. Learn more about it on our website. Students in Wake Tech's culinary and baking programs can now continue their education through a partnership with Johnson & Wales University in Charlotte. The agreement allows them to transfer their associate degree into one of 3 bachelor's degree programs in food service. About 100 students were recently inducted into Phi Theta Kappa. This international honor society provides opportunities for leadership and fellowship for students at 2-year colleges. Student officers in Wake Tech's Sigma Kappa Delta Honor Society for English and Literature traveled to Denver recently for the organization's international convention. Sigma Kappa Delta is Wake Tech's newest honor society. Wake Tech graduate Khadijah Scarborough has received an incredible honor. She's the winner of the statewide Dallas Herring Achievement Award from the North Carolina Community College system. Having grown up in foster care, Khadijah enrolled in Wake Tech as part of the Fostering Bright Futures program. Not only did she beat the odds and earn an associate degree, she actually earned 2 degrees, became a registered nurse, and was hired by the renowned Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Wake Tech celebrated science, technology, engineering, and math at STEM Day on the Southern Wake campus. The event was filled with cool, hands-on activities and demonstrations to raise awareness and get others excited about STEM education. STEM students are reaching new heights, literally. A team of students from engineering, computer programming, and math and physics competed in the NC Space Grant High Altitude Balloon Competition. The group spent 6 months designing and building a 600-gram helium balloon, which they launched into the air on the Southern Wake campus. The balloon rose nearly 80,000 feet and carried cameras, tracking devices, and data collection systems for 4.5 hours to a landing area 25 miles away in Johnston County. And finally, hundreds of car enthusiasts converged on the Hendrick Center for Automotive Excellence for the annual Fun in the Sun car show. The Hendrick Center is the premier facility for training EV and traditional automotive systems and collision repair technicians. And that's just a sampling of the latest news from Wake Tech.
Hi guys, I am Joy Curry. I am the Director of the Workforce Continuing Education, Financial Resources, and Student Support Department at Wake Tech. I am here today to give you just a little bit of information on our free training at Wake Tech. We have a plethora of courses, short-term courses that will allow you to skill up or even get a new skill. And we are offering these courses for free. That's right, free. No course registration, no supplies, no book costs. And we will even help you with your certification costs if you need that. We want to give you an opportunity to look at all of the courses that we have across the various pathways. We have IT courses and allied health courses, and we have law enforcement courses, public safety courses. We have whatever you are interested in. So if you are interested in getting into a free training course at Wake Tech, short-term training that will start you on a new pathway or even help you skill up for your current pathway, you should visit us at waketech.edu/free training. There you will find a list of the courses that are offered, and you will also find our scholarship application. It's a very simple process, just a few minutes, and we can have you all ready to go for your free training. And if you are not interested in any of the courses that are offered on the free training site through our Propel initiative, we have a wealth of personal enrichment courses, baking classes, and language classes. We have something here in our Workforce Continuing Education for anybody, for whatever you need. So please visit us at workforce.waketech.edu to see a list of all of our available courses.
Thank you for listening to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Join us next month for more insightful conversations about the programs and people of Wake Tech and how the college changes lives every day. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast app to have each episode delivered right to your computer or mobile device. For more, find us at podcast.waketech.edu. To learn more about Wake Tech's exceptional educational opportunities, visit waketech.edu.